Hey there. Welcome back to Down with the Sickness. I'm Lucas Catton. And it's been a while. It's been a little too long. In fact, I was having that conversation with a colleague a couple weeks ago, and he said he was driving and an episode came on, a previous one. I reminded him, I was like, hey, are you going to do any more episodes? And I said, yeah, I'm in the middle of a few things, and which actually leads to this particular episode and a few others that are coming right after this as part of a series. But been taking a deep dive, been really taking a look at the behavioral health space in general. And there's a lot of things going on, not just in that. I mean, healthcare overall and things that are happening. We've talked about it in some other episodes already, and we'll get into some more later. But this one's really near and dear to me because of, the majority of my 27 years working in this space has been in behavioral health specifically. And there's a lot happening, and try to put my finger on some of this. And it took more and more research, more and more connecting dots, identifying corollaries of different things and stuff that some people have clearly talked about before, other areas that are just now starting to get some coverage. And I'm excited about that. So I want to go ahead and get into it. And this is called the manufactured mental health crisis, how we've been lied to. And really, the behavioral health has remained a gray area for a long time. There's been a concerted effort in the past few decades to classify addiction and mental health issues as medical conditions. And on one hand, there's enough biological evidence of change to point to where some experts have been able to make valid arguments. While on the other hand, there are plenty of examples where social factors and behavioral patterns are the predominant driver, and it sort of negates the absence of any type of biological or physical factor, talking about addiction being a disease or mental health being a disease, that type of thing. And that's really the crux of the issue here. This has been exploited. And we're going to take a look and take some time into dissect some of these theories and some research tied to them. And we're also going to follow the amount of money spent on certain parts and the results. Just recently, there was an event that occurred, and the chairman of the subcommittee on healthcare and financial services in the U.S. House of Representatives from the Oversight Committee opened up a discussion to review mental health spending. And I was super excited when I saw this because I literally just, in part of the research for this, came across these exact figures that I was going to use in a post on LinkedIn. And I had been posting a series of things on LinkedIn that are kind of tied to this episode. And I was about to use some of these statistics. And then I saw that this article had posted, and it showed a picture of a graph. And it showed the incredibly high spending on one side and that side of the graph going up. And then the contrast of that is the worsening mental health conditions of America going down. And while more dollars are spent, the worse things got. And here's where his opening remarks for that subcommittee hearing. He said, "We are here to examine a difficult but urgent issue, the state of mental health in this country, why it appears to be getting worse, whether the system designed to address it is working, and what we in Congress should do about it. Over the past 2 decades, the United States has dramatically expanded access to mental health care. In 2002, about 27 million adults received mental health treatment. By 2024, that number had grown to nearly 60 million. And yet, outcomes are moving in the wrong direction. Depression rates are at historic highs. Suicide rates have climbed back to their highest levels in decades. By multiple measures, Americans report worse mental health today than in previous generations. As you can see on the chart behind me, as individuals receiving mental health care increased, the rate at which they reported their mental health being excellent decreased. That raises a fundamental question. If we are treating more people than ever before, why are we not seeing better results? This is not just a public health concern, it is also an economic one. A study published last week found that from 2000 through 2021, mental health and substance use disorders nominal spending grew from $40.9 billion annually to $139.6 billion Later on, he continued, on the government spending side, more than 1 in 3 Social Security disability insurance beneficiaries are enrolled due to mental disorders, making it one of the largest drivers of a program originally intended for those with severe physical limitations. At the same time, many Americans are bearing these costs personally. 1 in 10 have gone into debt to pay for mental health care. Perhaps most concerning is what we are seeing among young people. Rates of mental health diagnoses in children and adolescents have risen sharply, along with the use of psychiatric medications. Antidepressant prescriptions for individuals aged 12 to 25 increased by more than 63% between 2016 and 2022. During that time, a total of more than 221 million antidepressants were prescribed and dispensed to 18 million individuals aged 12 to 25. Yet even as treatment has expanded, outcomes for youth continue to worsen. In 2021, 57% of teen girls reported persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness, up from 36% just a decade earlier. We are intervening more, medicating more, and spending more, yet many of the people we are trying to help are not getting better. There is something in this system that is not working as intended. Let me be clear about what today's conversation is not. This is not an argument against mental health care, nor is it an attempt to stigmatize those seeking help. But when a system produces outcomes like these, despite significant investment, we have a responsibility to ask hard questions. Those are pretty powerful words in themselves. And in some cases, I could just stop there, but that's not at all where we're going to stop. In fact, we're going to go quite a bit deeper into a lot of these things. And I was super happy to see this because that's really what this is. This is pointing out the obvious statistics and questioning, and we should be allowed to question. There's nothing wrong with questioning. In fact, it should be the duty of everyone to question. And we haven't done enough questioning, unfortunately. And if they keep digging further, whether it's this congressional subcommittee or any other regulatory agency, or certainly the American people as a whole, what we'll soon discover is that the mental health crisis has been manufactured, and it is being perpetuated by those who profit from people being sick and staying sick. Let's go back a bit here. We're going to take a look at the Bible of the mental health industry, the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders, which is now in its 5th edition. The first edition was published in 1952 and listed 106 diagnoses. It continued to grow over time, and by the 3rd edition in 1980, there were 265 diagnostic categories. In its current form, there are now 297 disorders listed. It's virtually impossible not to find at least one disorder that we all could be diagnosed with if we go through it. If you don't believe me, you should try it for yourself. You can find plenty of them online. I've done this, I know it, and there's not a single person in my life that I couldn't say, oh, I could put them in this category or that category or whatever. No, I'm not a trained clinician, and I'm not going to pretend to be one. So I'm not trying to do that. However, it's pretty black and white. Take a look at it. It goes through the whole thing. So looking at that, that's one issue that you can see. If we have 297 different mental disorders that people can be classified with, and then that they're given these labels as, and that continues to grow over time, what is it that we're looking at? My argument is that it's the human condition, and we need to stop trying to label the human condition as a disorder. But I digress. I'll come back to that. Continuing on with this, way back in 1956, the American Medical Association declared alcoholism a disease. Fast forward to 1997, and then director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, Dr. Alan Leshner, declared addiction as a whole to be a chronic relapsing brain disease that is treatable but not curable. After that, Dr. Nora Volkow took over and has been the director since 2003. She's been continuing to force this theory on the nation, despite just as much evidence to the contrary. that people can and do fully recover or heal or become cured all the time, and there are no social or biological markers of a disease remaining, whether or not they go to treatment. Now, a long time ago, I made a really crappy documentary that attempted to look at this one particular issue. And something that stuck with me ever since is that the argument of whether or not it should be classified as a disease honestly doesn't really matter in a lot of cases if somebody is getting better. And I think that's what we need to focus on here is results. And going back to the opening remarks from the chairperson, are there results, and what results are we pointing to? So whether you want to add this word or not is relatively insignificant. I think it plays a part of the overall conversation here, but that was a good point that I thought was made, that if there's outcomes, if there's positive outcomes, people are getting better, then who cares what they call it initially, as long as people are getting better. However, that same theory has been pushed out for other disorders. And the National Institutes of Health claims that most mental illnesses can be treated, but cannot be cured, even if it's been years without any symptoms and when there was no biological evidence of disease. So for many of these things, even though they're very clearly and factually temporary in nature, for most of these conditions that they've labeled as disorders, the 297 or so of them, even though most of them are temporary, they've labeled them as incurable illnesses or diseases. And that's key as part of this whole thing. Now, the pharmaceutical connection also can't be ignored here. And this is one of the profit side of things. It's easy to pile up on them. But nonetheless, prescriptions for depression and anxiety alone have soared through the past few decades, to the point where there are tens of millions of children and adults taking them daily. This, despite the research that finally admitted in 2022 that there was no conclusive evidence that depression is caused by a reduction in serotonin levels. There's no actual connection there. But they've been pushing this on the American public and worldwide, truthfully, but especially the American public, for decades. Take an SSRI. It's going to help with your depression. Does it cure it? No, it can't be cured. It's a disease. Oh, okay, so keep taking it and hopefully you can live with the symptoms. Oh, but you have side effects from those. Oh, you must feel worse. Let's prescribe something else, and so on. Just like the chairman said, this isn't an attempt to stigmatize or fault people for believing what they were told to do or for even feeling some temporary relief. It's not about that at all. It's about the greater concept here. So people who have taken it and who have reported feeling better, I get it. This is not an attack on you, so please don't take it personally. This is on the system that has convinced you that maybe something else wouldn't be better and that you should do this. Let's also not forget that many anti-anxiety medications are commonly among the most abused prescription drugs, second usually only to like pain medications. Or how about the millions of kids who are put on stimulants for an ADHD diagnosis? I get it that parents want to do what their doctors tell them, and they want to do what they believe as, or what they've been told that is best practice, or that is this or is that. But I also, working in the addiction treatment space, have seen such a high number of people coming through who were originally given these drugs as kids and developed other addictions as a result, or continued abusing amphetamines and grew onto methamphetamine and so on and so forth. So this has to be taken into account. Quickly jumping to these heavier chemicals that are altering brain function and have side effects and have potential addictive natures in themselves clearly have not been reversing the trend or helping people long term. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had the statistics that we started out with. So, where do these come from? These disorders, these labels, these diagnoses are coming from a categorization of symptoms that are identified. And these are, of course, valid because people are experiencing things and they have the result, and so they're wanting to classify it. But what is who's actually benefiting from the diagnosis itself? Because if somebody is exhibiting some symptoms or having some difficulties, and then you can apply some processes or some therapeutic elements and they can get better, then who cares what category they're then put in. It honestly does not matter. And most of these disorders are originally caused by some kind of trauma. And whether that's like a single traumatic event or a series of smaller events that are tied together. These are often referred to like as big T's, like a big traumatic event, or little T's for smaller traumatic events. Let's be clear. Everyone experiences trauma in their lives. Literally everybody. We all have pain, suffering, difficulty. It's part of the human experience. The difference is in how we all respond to those events and if we get stuck in them. The same thing can happen to two people and they can have completely different responses. And that's the difference. How do they respond? How do they bounce back? What are the tools that we're given in order to overcome that? How are we given, how are we able to reframe different things? How are we able to benefit? How are we able to learn? How are we able to grow stronger? How are we able to do these things? Unfortunately, a lot of people are then told, oh, this happened to you. It's not your fault. You then have this diagnosis, and then you're now stuck in this condition for the rest of your life. However, some of the most revered trauma experts are Peter Levine, Gabor Mate, and Bessel van der Kolk. Now, among many quotes from them, there's a few here that I picked out and I want to share. For example, one from Levine is that trauma is a fact of life. It does not, however, have to be a life sentence. That directly goes against what they're saying about these diagnoses and whether or not you are stuck with them forever. One of the leading experts say it doesn't have to be a life sentence. And Mate famously said, all of the diagnoses that you deal with, depression, anxiety, ADHD, bipolar illness, post-traumatic stress disorder, even psychosis, are significantly rooted in trauma. They are manifestations of trauma. Therefore, the diagnoses don't explain anything. The problem in the medical world is that we diagnose somebody and we think that is the explanation. He's behaving that way because he is psychotic. She's behaving that way because she has ADHD. Nobody has ADHD. Nobody has psychosis. These are processes within the individual. It's not a thing that you have. This is a process that expresses your life experience. It has meaning in every single case. Again, one of the leading people, experts in this space, is directly contradicting, and yet they keep on going about their business the way they do. And finally, another short quote here from van der Kolk. The greatest sources of our suffering are the lies we tell ourselves. Now that one, to me, I think actually says a lot more than the number of letters or words used there. The lies that we tell ourselves, both in our heads, the lies that we grab onto, that other people tell us, that we believe, these things are perpetuating the conditions. Now, let's take a look at some larger traumatic events that we have faced as a nation, on top of the ones we experience as individuals, just in the past 25 years or so. The tragic events of September 11th, 2001 shook the nation. Ever since, we've been told to never forget and are reminded every year that terrorism is a constant threat. The Great Recession from 2007 to 2009 caused financial destruction, and many people lost their savings, their homes, and their dignity. Most recently, much of the world came to a standstill in 2020 due to the COVID pandemic, causing severe rifts and fear while forcing people into isolation. Throughout this entire time, the 24-hour news cycles and networks have continued to push these messages of fear, chaos, threats, and panic, keeping people constantly on edge and filled with repeated reminders. Never forget. Violence is everywhere. Watch out for the economy. Oil is this. inflation is that. Watch out for these fearful things. Look who was murdered. That's what the news does. It puts people into a state of shock and fear. Even though, statistically, if you take a look at things, the world is actually much safer now than it was a long time ago. And people are generally good. People are generally in a good place. There's lots of abundance. It's what we focus our attention on, which is going to be a whole other episode itself, but it's what we focus our attention on that winds up causing our internal reactions, such as, where he said, the greatest sources of our suffering are the lies we tell ourselves. Those lies don't necessarily have to be based on a complete lie. The lie could be started as a truth, such as, this event happened. The lie then becomes, you must always be afraid of that happening again. That's what the news does to us. Keeps people in a constant state of fear and worry. And fear is widely recognized as a tool used to control people, especially on a population level. These things and more combined to where deaths of despair began to rise sharply from 2001 onwards, as did mass shootings, and coincidentally, so has social media usage. However, billionaires in tech, pharma, and media weren't the only ones capitalizing on the opportunity to profit from this formula. Venture capital and private equity firms have poured billions of dollars into mental health and addiction treatment companies in recent years. And the largest health insurance companies have posted record profits, more than tripling their revenue in the past decade to roughly $1.7 trillion. Another factor that has driven spending in the behavioral health was the passage of both the Addiction and Mental Health Parity Act and also the Affordable Care Act. These laws required more insurance coverage for behavioral health conditions while removing pre-existing conditions as exemptions of coverage. On the surface, these look like really great things since it gave initially more access to people who could use their insurance to be able to get care. But it escalated quickly, and providers soon found out they could make six figures from a single patient, rather easily in some cases, especially when you have to diagnose them and then use that as justification, which we'll get into in a second too. It turns out that being sick is big business, especially when the type of sickness is said to have no cure and requires ongoing treatment. And when both the insurers and the providers profit more, the worse people are, there's incentive for them to hand out more and more diagnoses, more and more medications, all based on the book where we all kind of have one disorder or another. What happens if you want to use your insurance to talk to a therapist? They have to give you a diagnosis in order to receive payment. What happens if you go to a treatment program for more severe addiction or mental health problems? They are required by most state laws and regulatory bodies to give you a diagnosis within 24 hours of admission. So before you even really get into it, before you have an opportunity to possibly even heal from something else to where it shows that your diagnosis may be temporary because they can apply some things and you can get better quickly, or you can start to relieve some of the symptoms, etc. They have to give you a diagnosis. Why? Because if they don't, they will not get paid. And guess what? When you have multiple, many of them can get paid more. When you get prescribed things and they're handing out meds, they get paid for handing out meds. When you do med checks, they get paid for med checks. They get paid the more often that they are doing things to the degree that you are sick. When you have modifiers and compounding diagnoses in order to inflate not only the level of care where they get paid more the sicker you are, but then fight against them to be able to get more days at those higher levels of care. And now that there's no there's no restrictions on readmissions because of the Affordable Care Act and the Parity Act. Now they can just readmit people over and over and over and over again, whether or not they get better. And there's no accountability there. There's really nothing tied to whether or not people get better. Hence, we see from the beginning, more money is spent and people are getting worse. And we keep asking, why is this? But we're asking in the wrong areas, or we're asking the wrong people, or we're looking at the wrong parts. Now we're finally starting to look at the right parts. It's the system itself that is making people worse. This is a manufactured mental health crisis. This isn't naturally occurring. And then many people, they continue to live with these new identities of the disorders and labels that they've been given. Instead of recognizing that most conditions are in fact temporary, they're led to believe they now have these things for life. And therefore, to live out that script, even to the point of explaining why they can't get unstuck in life. It's a different kind of crutch. They're not even aware it's causing more damage because a trusted source gave it to them. Their doctor, their therapist, their psychiatrist, whomever in that field. These are mental health professionals. This is what they've been taught. This is what the schools are teaching. This is what the books are telling them, that they have to do this. And so they're just perpetuating this lie upon people. And the people are then perpetuating it and adopting it. And then they continue to get worse. And then they seek treatment. And that treatment includes more drugs. That includes more labels. That includes more treatment. But none of it points to getting better. In fact, it makes excuses why you can't get better by saying that you can't get better. That you can only, it's treatable, but not curable. But that's a lie. We have been set up and lied to over and over and over again. The powers that be are routinely profiting off our constant state of heightened distress. And so the money keeps flowing, more fear pumped into society, more ads driving them into these mental health treatments, more therapy, more prescriptions, and more profits as a result. It's like a slot machine that hits 777s every few spins. Frankly, it's disgusting. I'm ashamed that I was even a part of any of this, thinking that what I was doing in different ways was helping people. And I know that along the way, it has been. I know that some of the programs that I've worked with have done really great things. This isn't every single person in the entire industry fits this category. I'm talking about the system and the way it's set up. Yes, there's amazing therapists out there. Yes, there's some amazing programs. Yes, there's some amazing doctors. I'm not discounting that at all. Because yes, however, those are not the majority. The majority are following the script given to them by the system that continues to perpetuate this illness. The manufactured mental health crisis. However, I'd say there's a glimmer of hope today. Not only from the subcommittee hearing that we started off with and people taking a look at it, but also people starting to pay more attention because they're fed up with the ever-increasing costs and the worsening statistics. People are starting to look at the human condition with more common sense. Physical health and mental health are part of whole person care. And when one suffers, so does the other. Thankfully, when one improves, the other improves as well. Things like the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine are catching on again. These include optimal nutrition, physical activity, restorative sleep, stress management, connectedness with other people, and avoidance of risky substances. These 6 pillars alone, if you apply these and the further descriptions that they go into, if you apply these, you're going to naturally feel better physically and mentally. That's what happens. It doesn't take more chemicals to be added to your food for you to take every day. It doesn't take more diagnoses to, to explain why you can't do certain things. It doesn't take all that. It might take a while to undo a lot of this. Might take quite a while. It doesn't have to, but it might. Depends on how much people are going to resist this truth. Thankfully, there's also advancements in other areas, things like functional medicine, epigenetics, breathwork, meditation, and so much more. Like there's so many different things out there. There are advancements in technology that are coming about as well. How do we apply things to have better heart-brain coherence? How do we apply things to pay attention to some of the other physiological and biological markers that are going on that we can address with other things that are much more naturally occurring in our bodies and fortify those or supplement those or that kind of thing. Like these are advancements that are becoming more and more popular, thankfully. So there's a little bit of hope here. I happen to have a lot of hope, but I also am not at all disillusioned by the amount of effort that it's going to take. I mean, I've recently met with some very big players in this space, and I can tell you they are either oblivious to the damage they're causing or are so tied to the profits, they are unwilling to look. But people and government agencies are starting to pay more attention. And things like prevention and subclinical support systems and these other technological advances as well. And even simply things like social prescribing. Get out and do things. Go take a walk. Meet up with some friends. Have a conversation. Fall in love. Connect with nature. Go out and do some art. Look at a beautiful skyline. Things that are present and inherent in the natural world that can counteract some of these other things. Turn off social media as much as possible. I'm as guilty as anybody. But one thing I have done is I've cut out like major news quite a bit from my life. Like I won't watch the evening news. I won't watch 24-hour news channels, things like that. Like keep the fear and destruction out of it because that drives people into a lower and lower state, as we talked about. Keep the social media makes people feel worse because they think that everybody else is doing better than them. I'm victim to that too. Absolutely. Oh, so-and-so has this and I don't. So-and-so does this and I can't. So-and-so, it makes us feel worse. And there's plenty of research and statistics that, that come about more and more lately. But also we got to take a look at what's happening in AI and mental health and how that's going to be affected. And people are being driven to there and there's a ton of money being sent there, possibly more money than, eventually it could be more money than many of these other areas that's driven into there. And yet that is not real connection. It's not real connection. You might be able to gain information. Hopefully it's correct. You might be able to gain, access to some other things, ask some questions, things like that, find some useful resources, but it will never replace human connection. We know that the so-called experts who have manufactured this crisis will fight against it, as it'll ultimately cost them trillions of dollars. But isn't the health and well-being of you and your loved ones worth it? We certainly think so. And as I mentioned at the beginning, this is the first in a multi-part series where we're going to take a closer look at several of these points, presenting factual evidence to support these claims, not just stating them, but even listing out the publications and providing links and things like that so that you can see it for yourself. It's an education for us to stop living in the shadows and trusting people who have a lot to lose by you getting better. Afterwards, or somewhere along the way, we hope that you want to step up and take a challenge, that this is going to present for you to do something about it, however that might look for you. we might have some ways that we can suggest. As always, I want to thank you for your time. I hope there was something in here that was of some value to you, or at least sparked some curiosity. I encourage you to take a look. Definitely stay tuned for more episodes coming up on this topic. As I said, those will go deeper into some of these points. And if you want to connect and have a discussion about any one of these things, or to find resources that can help or things like that, reach out anytime. Hit me up at lucascatton.com or inoviacircle.com. Thank you.